Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of That Annuity Show. And Ramsey, I think I actually gave you the wrong number last time. I got it right intentionally. This is episode 151.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've broken through that milestone.
That's a few.
It is.
That?
Now we're finally getting good, right?
Right.
That's 3 years.
We can tell you that. So
That's 3 full years worth of episodes.
Right. So
Yeah.
we've got a great guy on our show who not only knows the business, actually has his own podcast, and I've listened to. I'm a listener, and I've learned a lot here over the last couple months since I discovered it. But I'd like to introduce our guest of the day, Mr. Brad Swineheart, who is Senior Vice President of Business Development at White Glove. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, thanks for having me. Awesome show. Heard lots of really great things. Excited to be part of it.
Hey, listen, thanks for your time today. So anyway, just for the audience, really tell people who is Brad and what exactly do you do?
What is it you do here, right?
Yes.
So White Glove, at its core, is a marketing service for advisors that really tries to help them get in front of new prospects without any of the standard pain points, right? Like the huge marketing risk of doing, digital advertising or mailers and hoping people show up, the burdensome, tasks of planning seminars or trying to organize a webinar and get people to log on. White Glove really specializes in doing all of that for agents and advisors. We do all of the work, so the advisor just shows up, they give a presentation, they book appointments. They pay us after based on actual attendance, so we're taking on all the financial risk. So my job here at White Glove, I started, almost 6 years ago now, when it was in the basement of two financial advisors firm, right? And we had this crazy idea of like, well, wait a minute, what if we had advisors pay after and they only paid on attendance, and what if we guaranteed there was such high quality in the room that we guaranteed they'd pick up a client? And just that simple business model led to tremendous growth, where we were doing 600 to 700 seminars every single month all over the U.S. and Canada. And much like most of our listeners, 2020 happened, and we had to, talk about a wild ride, being at a seminar company that gets paid for butts and seats during a global pandemic when no one can go out. We really had to kind of dig down and say, well, what are we really good at? How do we continue helping advisors, and how do we continue helping communities that are desperate for information? So we quickly pivoted to webinars, learned, much like everybody else did, that just because you're good at speaking at a seminar does not mean you're good at giving a webinar. And there's a lot of tech involved, so we very quickly pivoted to training advisors how to do webinars better and running that whole service for them with the polls and pop-ups and automation, so they don't have to do literally anything. Now I got advisors calling me all the time, said, hey, I just booked 3 appointments while I was at my son's baseball game from a webinar you just ran. So what do I do? Mostly I talk for a living. But as any good business development person does, but I work on the kind of the strategic partnership side of the business. So I'm primarily working with product manufacturers, RIAs, FMOs to create programs that helps their advisors see more growth. And then on the flip side of the business, then I am then working with our team of marketing consultants to make sure our advisors are seeing the most success, whether that's passing down exactly what's working, or helping them understand why it's the crummy library and not the bougie country club where they should have their event. Like, that's the type of stuff that really ignites my passion, is how do you see the highest ROI from a marketing effort? That's what I really help our advisors achieve when working with White Glove.
Yeah. All right, so I've got a few questions based on those comments. I'm going to work from the back. The last thing you said was really interesting. The importance of location. Right, so you said something very right. There was a very clear message in there that a modest location may be better than the country club. Talk about that a little bit.
So what we're doing, and there's two different types of seminars. So to be clear, there's a food seminar where you're bribing them to come into a nice location, you're feeding them a steak, and then there's a little bit of give and take where, okay, I bribed you to come here, and now you have to hear exactly what I do in my day job, and I get to pitch you, right? There's that type of seminar.
There was a very famous New York Times article written about that.
That is going to attract a very specific audience. What I'm referring to is an educational seminar. There's no food, there's no bribe. They're only coming because they have a concern about how their retirement assets are going to be taxed, or how do they pass down their significant wealth to future generations. That venue is one of the most important pieces that you need to select when you're planning a seminar. So if you use white glove, don't use white glove, doesn't matter. But if you want to have better attendance rates, better registration rates, I liked how you phrased it, pick a modest venue that has an educational credibility to it. Business center, golf course, conference center, those types of things that someone might associate with sales, those will tank. They regularly underperform compared to the dingy community center, the local library, the high school art classroom, right? Those things that have this credibility of, you know what, I've never been sold anything here. I'm going to be coming in to learn. It's not about the water feature out front. It's not about how nicely the hedges, accentuate the opening of the venue and that they serve Fiji water. That's not really what it's about. It's about, I'm coming in for an education, and this sounds like a bad way of saying it, but when you have that venue that's selected that has educational credibility, their guard is down. When you pick a business center, a conference center, a hotel, a golf course, they're coming in with their walls put up very high, like, okay, I'm coming in for this, but I know he's going to try to sell me on something, so I'm prepared, right? So if you want higher appointment rates, go to the community center. Too often we hear advisors, they'll say, well, I don't want this venue. That's not what my business represents, right? I'm the top XYZ in my area. I want, my office is gorgeous. I want people to see that. It's like, well, sure. That's where you hold your client meetings. That's where you hold your client events. Sure. That's not where you introduce yourself to the public as an educator. So you almost have to take your ego out of it if you want to have a better performing event.
So here's the question, though. I totally get the appeal of it. Like you've created a great screening process. You end up with a pre-screened audience, right? Because you take away that sort of that incentive that is the steak or what have you. The question, though, is can you still draw a crowd? Like without the steak dinner, can you still get a good crowd? And how do you go about doing that?
Oh, absolutely. We fill over, we're about 98% fulfillment rates right now with white glove. So that means if an advisor says, hey, I want to speak to 20 households, 98% of the time we're hitting that number for them. And what you're doing is, it's almost the exact opposite of a steak mailer, right? What you're doing is you're marketing the event's credibility, you're marketing the educational topic, you're marketing, you have these concerns, come learn about how to address them. And then as that professional stands in front of that audience, we'll market, we'll do taxes and retirement, for example. They'll come in, they don't even know who is presenting. We're not saying, hey, come see Paul, hey, come see Ramsey. We're saying, hey, come learn about this. And then they get to stand in front of the audience and say, hey, this is a very important topic. I was selected as your local presenter and educator. This is what I do in my day job, but this is what we're here to do today to teach you about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so you're effectively deselecting. I don't think this was the New York Times article. The plate lickers.
Plate lickers. Yeah, I mean, there's a very certain type of person, and I'll let you connect A to C here, but there is a very certain type of person that will go to an educational event at a library for an hour and a half hour there, half hour back, so 2.5 hours of their time with no food to learn about how to pass their wealth down to future generations or how to save significant amount of taxes on retirement assets. There's a certain type of person that will do that. And usually that type of person is someone with those concerns because they have those types of assets.
Yeah.
Well, anyone can offer me a steak and I might go eat it,
Yeah, what I love about this industry is like what's old is new, but what's new always has a different slice to it. Like seminars, right? I mean, they're as old as dirt in this business. Yet, look what the energy is it takes to get people there. I remember, Brad. Now this is going to date me, and you probably weren't even. You probably were in a swing set when I got these mailers from successful money management seminars. Ramsey, does that ring a bell with you? They would send out. This is back before, you used to get these mimeographed flyers from your community college sent to your house, and you'd open it up, and there was a course you could say. I think Brad, you even paid to do this. You paid $10 to go there. And, it worked till it didn't work. So tell us, okay, so seminars are dead. The king is dead. Long live the king. What's the future edge? Education. How has this sort of changed and morphed in the last sort of 2 years?
Well, I'll say this. We talked a little bit about webinars and seminars. For a hot minute there, food seminars saw a big spike. These are good again. And it wasn't necessarily the food as the bribe. It was, I understand that the restaurant's clean. I've never been to this community center. I don't know how. I don't trust their cleaning processes. Right? That's kind of dead now. Now everyone's comfortable getting back out into real life. But what we saw for the last 2 years was webinars working very well. And right off the bat, advisors struggled. Every presenter struggled switching to virtual. The industry was flooded by marketing ninjas and overnight gurus that could promise you 600 registrations for your webinar, and then no one would show up, and they ran away with your money. And that's all about died out. There's still a lot of advisors that have bad taste in their mouth over webinars that they don't work because they went with the cheapest option on the market. That company doesn't exist anymore. That college kid made their money and they moved on. But webinars still have a very impactful role in marketing going forward. If an advisor can adapt to meet people virtually, connect like this, and close business, they really have unlimited inventory. They can get as many leads as they can possibly work if they would adapt to webinars, because you're never going to oversaturate your own market. You just move today I'm going to market in Michigan, tomorrow Tennessee, then North Carolina. As long as I can close comfortably virtually, now I have unlimited lead flow. And what we've seen is advisors adapt to that during the pandemic because they had to, and now they're not going back. I got probably 5 or 6 advisors that'll do each over 100 webinars this year. And that's it. They're scaling their offices, they're hiring advisors all over the country, and they have unlimited lead flow. And at the same time, I have other advisors saying, hey, how do I get 20 more households in my area? I want more and more and more. And it's just because you market it harder doesn't mean you're going to get more people there. There's only a certain amount of inventory in an area. We fill up, like I said earlier, 98% of seminar orders. We fill 117% for webinar orders. So you would think people, hey, I want to get back out into person. I want to go see these things. But we rang a very, very loud bell that you just can't unring. And that is, you can do anything you want from the comfort of your own home in your pajamas. You can learn things. You can buy things. You can educate. You can save your retirement plan. And you can do that all sitting on your couch where you've never been more comfortable, which for a seasoned presenter is almost a number one goal when you're standing in front of somebody. Can you make them so comfortable that they're willing to open up, discuss, share with you? Webinars do that because they're already comfortable.
So what are those skills to adapt? My stereotype, tell me what, and Brad, tell me what I'm wrong. The ones, people I saw who were good at seminars, they just kind of they weren't necessarily the best prospectors, right? But they were systematic. They were good at following a process for a 3-month period of time, right, to get the ROI. Very patient. Didn't do high pressure sales, but they kind of work their way over 3 or 4 sessions, and they were good at that last meeting. What are the new skills, right? You got to have to do this virtually.
So it's less. There's not really any brand new skills that you got to learn, other than the tech piece, right? The tech piece, you have to have a calendar link. Have to have Calendly or something so they can book right away. You should definitely have credibility pieces. Have your LinkedIn needs to look good, right? 70% of affluent prospects are going to look you up on LinkedIn before they do business with you. If they don't find you, they're just not going to call. You have to have social media. You have to have Facebook. Sorry, but you do. Did you know that there are more Facebook users than there are Christians in this world? So if you don't think your prospects are on Facebook, they are. So you have to have those things, right? You have to have a very robust virtual presence. And then the talk track itself, how you perform a webinar is just modifications. When you're at a seminar and you're standing up in front of people, you're the show, right? Your arm movements, you're moving around, you're walking back and forth, you're calling on people. You're the show. You get to see their reactions. You see them lean in. You see them fall asleep. You see them, their eyes are glazing over because you're talking too high level or too in the weeds. You can adjust when you're live. You can't do that stuff on a webinar. You can't see your people. You don't know if they're paying attention. And oftentimes as a presenter, that throws you off. Because that's how I judge my cadence. That's how I judge, did my joke land? Should I keep going this way? Something that probably a lot of advisors just struggle with because most advisors I talk to have issues with just overly confident, right? That's everyone in this industry is overly confident. You just have to take that same confidence when you do a webinar and just say, hey, you know what? My joke was funny. You know what? People are paying attention. People are leaning in, because you just have to exude that energy. A couple other technical tips: less information. It's never about who can teach the most things. Your prospects will learn 3, maybe 4 core ideas, and they're going to forget 80% of the details that are around those. So just stick to that. Stick to 3 or 4 ideas. Have a call to action after each one where you can put up your calendar link. And then, since you're not the show, you're not standing in front of them physically, less content, but more slides. If you get on there and you do a webinar and there's one slide with 17 bullet points on it and you're just talking for 45 minutes, you're gonna lose them. They're not gonna pay attention. Instead, turn that 17 bullets into 34 slides where you say the bullet, then you say the bullet with the description, right? If you keep that slide deck moving, then that helps them understand that the seminar is moving forward, the webinar is moving forward. And then one final thing I would just note is set that agenda up front. When you're doing a webinar, that's so important to give them the appearance that things are moving forward. So if you set an agenda up front, we're going to cover A, B, and C. What that does is it engages the brain in a specific way to make a checklist, and your brain hates unfinished products or projects. It hates it. It will always try to finish those projects. So if you're toning out, you're zoning out at A, you're like, no, this is really applicable to me, but B and C are coming, you're still going to pay attention for those other 2 points.
Oh, that is fascinating, and you hit on 2 things that I often spend a lot of time thinking about. So one is sort of a reasonable expectation of absorption of information, which you addressed, which is said 3 or 4 points. And then beyond that is retention, which often seems like it's close to 0. Or it's closer to 0 than one would think. And so so it's really about thinking about, if I hear you correctly, it's what are you really aiming for? You're aiming to give people just enough information that they feel smarter, build enough trust that they're going to want to follow up with you, and to fully educating somebody realistically is going to take multiple conversations over time, which ultimately could lead to a conversion and a sale. Is that a fair assessment of your approach?
Oh, absolutely. What your goal in any sort of seminar or webinar is to do is to, just what you said, right? Educate them so they can leave feeling empowered. You need to clarify the issues at hand. I think right now, it used to be you create the dragon, then you slay the dragon. I don't really think that's an issue right now. There's lots of dragons flying around. So I think you need to clarify the problem and then show them that there is a solution to it. So empower them to know what, so they can walk out of there thinking, what, I learned a few things, a few actionable items, know like, ooh, yeah, there is a very clear problem, and this would be the guy to go talk to about it to come up with my specific solution. Get them to know you, like you, trust you. That's always, top there. I always say, stories are better than facts. That if you can rattle off numbers to them the whole time, they're not going to retain any of that. But if you can tell a story and bake in some tactical steps into those stories, then you kind of hit both sides of the brain where you're relating to emotions, but you're also explaining to them, here's the next steps.
Now, do you see webinars complementing in-person seminars, or are they, as a lead into, or are they really two separate animals getting to the same point?
I would say they're two separate audiences. There's people that will attend a webinar are never going to go to the local library. There's people that will go to a library that'll never log on to a webinar. Advisors have to really become, if they're going to do one over the other, which most advisors are saying, I just want to do in-person seminars. I've done those for the last 15 years. That's what I want to do. You really only have two choices. Either one, get comfortable doing webinars and add that in to hit that other audience, or get comfortable with one of your competitors talking to those people virtually, because it's going to happen. We have advisors based all over the country that do seminars all over the country. And, you got a guy in Minnesota that's doing, 100 events this year, and he's doing them in every single affluent area that has marketing availability for a webinar. So that's 100% going to be in some advisor's backyard that's uncomfortable doing webinars. So it really just depends on your lead flow, how you close business. If you can't close business virtually, probably webinars aren't for you. But that's okay. Seminars are back, but there is just there's more inventory out there than there ever has been before, I would say.
So you talked about marketing strategy for individual webinars. So you mentioned this one person that does 100 a year. So is it 100 webinars with potentially national reach, or is it literally by the state, by the city? For a given webinar, are you literally just targeting like one sort of small area, or how big an area would you target for an individual webinar?
Typically, what we're doing is we're looking for pockets of highly affluent prospects, and typically that's going to be 25 to 40 mile radius around a specific area. So that's what we would target for a webinar. It's much. There are companies out there that will do statewide or nationwide webinars. We see them as less effective for generating high quality attendees anyway.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. I was just looking through my podcast feed to find the one. I think it was in your 40s. You interviewed an advisor who had been transformed doing the virtual stuff. I'm trying to remember. I don't want to put his name on here, but
his name's Brad too, so that's why we're good friends.
That's good.
I've yet to meet a Brad I didn't like. So
okay, so a couple of things in there from that show that jumped out at me. And question number one was, where do podcasts fit in all of this stuff? Right?
Podcasts are an amazing tool to boost your credibility, and then also to get in front of people that normally wouldn't take your call, right? So if someone finds that you have a podcast, you have a podcast, I have a podcast, there's this just assumed credibility that comes along with it. Like, oh, he's got a podcast, they're kind of like, okay, this guy's a professional, he's established. it's a really interesting medium. I'll say two things. That one, it boosts your credibility immensely. And then if your prospects choose to listen to your podcast, 80% of those are at home in a quiet, alone time that this person has set aside just for them. And they're putting your words, your mouth, your speech directly into their brain during one of their quiet, intimate moments. So the power behind that to showcase who you are as a person and your credibility is outstanding, right? You can use that podcast when you're doing webinars, when you're doing seminars, when you're doing email marketing or social media. And if you can get people to listen to it, we were talking before the show too that people will say, "Oh, I've been listening to your podcast for 6 months. It's great." It's like, "Oh, well, I've never talked to you. I didn't talk to you in those 6 months, but they've heard me. They understand who I am." So podcasts are a really important tool for that way. It's not a lead generation machine. Most advisors are, "Well, how will it get me leads?" Probably won't, right? But it definitely will boost your credibility in that virtual setting, which is very, very important. The second way to use a podcast to generate high quality conversations is interview the people that you want as your ideal clients. If you specialize, I talked to this one gentleman, he's actually one of my podcast guests as well. His practice is focused on dental practices looking to sell to private equity in the next 5 years. Like, that's how niche he is. And he uses a podcast because he calls people like that fit that niche, and that's who he interviews. And what do? Well, they share it with all their friends. They share it with other people in that circle. They say, "Oh my gosh, this is what I'm doing, but so is Joe Smith down the road. He's one of my friends, and he's doing the same thing." And then he's going to brag how he was on a podcast. So there's a way to get introduced and to talk to people and develop a real strong bond with somebody by having them as a guest on your podcast. And then what's he going to speak about? He's going to speak about his dental practice. He's going to speak about looking to sell it. Who's going to listen to that? Other people that have that same situation, right? So that's a very useful way to use a podcast to deliver specific client types that you're looking for.
Now, I know you help advisors do podcasts, right? If I'm an advisor, you'll help set this up, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So one track would be what you described, week. It's a lot, we know, right? Even with minimal production, right, Ramsey? It's a commitment. It is a commitment. So, Brett, what about the alternative strategy, which would be to say, let me do a 10-part series on, creating predictable, giving yourself a raise in Social Security, and it just sits there. What's the shelf life on something like that? Is that advisable? Is it more important to do regular podcasts or not?
It depends on what you're looking to do. If you're looking to build a following, if you're looking to have, an audience for your podcast, I wouldn't do one if you're not prepared to do 100. If you are looking for a content piece to boost your website, to send to prospects, you could totally do a 10-part series, and you might not even need to make it a podcast. You can record it on Zoom and put it on YouTube. You can, having it on Spotify is a great resource as well, but you can just as easily incorporate video in that and do a shorter series, right? If it was 5 minutes, you did 10 videos of this is how, retirement planning works, or whatever you want as more of a generalized way to go about it. Absolutely. Like, it's a different medium for marketing. You're going to use it in different ways. Like we were saying, there's people we've never talked to that listen to the podcast because it interests them. That's kind of the opposite of doing a 10-part series on something specific. Those you're going to send to people deliberately. You're going to use it to make your website more credible. You can feature them on your LinkedIn. Pin that video right on your LinkedIn, guys. And that will help you in a different way, but they're both beneficial.
There's always been something that I've struggled with figuring out, like, all the nuance between all these various media, right? It's like for everything that we've discussed, whether it's the podcast, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a seminar, there are certain things you can reasonably expect from each one. They all are a lot of work. They all take a lot of effort.
That's
right?
true.
And I think the biggest thing one needs to focus on to be successful at any of this stuff is just to kind of understand where things begin and end. So, for example, your comment that podcasts aren't good for leads, like that's a really important thing for somebody to understand up front, that a podcast can be a very powerful tool for credibility, and that's good between point A and point B, but it's not necessarily going to be your lead generation and how that fits into your strategy. So, I get, as somebody who's still learning all this stuff, it's quite fascinating to hear perspective on what element of the sales process that each of these things is sort of most impactful. But that leads me to a question which I wanted to ask earlier, which is, you had said that pre-pandemic you were doing 600 to 700 live seminars, which is just a lot already. Now that you're in the webinar world, what do those numbers look like now? Like how many webinars are you doing a year? How many do you want to do a year? I think you can do a year. How much more capacity has going virtual given you as an organization that's presumably more or less the same size?
Going virtually we almost have an unlimited inventory now. For those advisors that are saying, I want more leads and are comfortable doing webinars, there's something I think we've kind of figured out. There's like somewhere around 3,200 specific marketing areas of affluent prospects in the country that we could market to at any given time. Don't quote me on that number, but it's probably pretty close to what we've kind of running through all of our data and our marketing analysis of these. This is what we need in a given area in order to fill an event. So, and depending on the capacity, how many households are there, how many affluent prospects are there, that could be one seminar, that could be 4 webinars, in a given month. So the capacity is there. If an advisor wants to hybrid between virtual and in-person, there's unlimited inventory right now. And with everything that's crazy going on, your prospects have questions, your clients have questions. Now is the time to make something happen. I know a lot of advisors, they start winding down in June, they take July off, they start ramping back up in August, and then, okay, let's really hit it hard in the fall. I think this year that would be a mistake. I think this year that the next 2 to 3 months, what we're seeing is huge response rates from the consumers that have concerns, have significant wealth, and someone's going to get in front of them. So I don't particularly, after the last couple of years, you strike while the iron's hot, So I don't think it would be in anybody's best interest to kind of let off the gas right now. I think now is the time to double down on marketing and get in front of those prospects. But to your original, question, we're doing about 60% of our events now are in person, about 40% are virtual. And, the numbers keep going up every single month. So, and that the capacity is still there. The only thing we run... 32... Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, the only thing we run into, and this is just another thing for a good idea for advisors, is very often an advisor gets comfortable with a venue and with a topic, right? I've been here the last 3 years. I love talking about taxes and retirement, and this is my sweet spot. I love this library. I know how the setup works, or whatever. You can only market the same thing over and over and over again before you need to have a rotation. And a rotation can be something as simple as changing venues, moving 10 miles down the road. It could be, changing topic. Let's not talk about taxes this month. Let's talk about estate planning or Social Security. But adding in that rotation keeps you from oversaturating your own market.
So
3,200. That's, you said more or less, whether it's 2,800 or 3,400, that's way more. If you had asked me what the number was, I would have thought 200 or 300, 400, something like that? Like
Marketing
that's remarkable.
zones?
Marketing
That's
zones. That's
marketing
a lot.
zones. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
So-
Paul. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, well, okay. One problem, and I've seen it with agents. I've seen it with wholesale selling teams and marketing teams. Is I did it and it worked 2 years ago, and I'm still going to do that same play up the center. Right? Boom. Oh, they all figured it out. Why is this not working? The other problem is, we got a lot of AD. I mean, Ramsey, we must have, this industry would be just a great market for somebody selling, ADHD treatments. Right. This group is like, I sent this out last week and I didn't get I didn't get a lead on it. Okay, so the flip side is, you got people who have something to work who stick too long and don't know when to change up because, if it's working, don't disturb it. It's too risky. I get it. The other problem is, I tried this last week, it didn't work. Now I'm on to problem whatever. So if we kind of went through the tactics or strategies you're describing, podcast you said, and I agree with you, 50 episodes, yes, do it for 50 episodes to get a market. How long a commitment should you be making to webinars versus in-person seminars today to know, do you really have is this working?
I would say don't bank it all on your first event, right? These guys play roulette where if it lands on black, they love it. They're going to do 10 more. If it lands on red, they hate it, and seminars suck. Same thing with webinars. What we see the magic number for us is 3 to 4 seminars or webinars. Once that person, the one and done guys that say, I want to try this, and then I'm going to wait to see what kind of results I get, we got about a 50-50 chance they're going to come back to us. And usually if they do come back, it's 90 or 120 days later when they're like, oh my gosh, I just closed this huge client off the seminar I did 4 months ago. It's like, well, yeah, but your conveyor belt is empty now because you stopped doing them waiting for those results. And I understand marketing budgets and stuff like that, but if you're just jumping from one idea to the next, you're never going to know what works, and you're never going to really refine your processes. So with seminars, webinars, we say 4. The first one's going to be okay. You're going to learn what you did wrong. You're going to get better on the second one. By the third one, you're going to have a real process going, and you're going to have started to see some business close. By the fourth one, okay, now you're rocking. It's a well-oiled machine. You're getting business from the first, 1 or 2. That's coming in, and you just keep that conveyor belt full and keep going. And usually when an advisor does 4 events with us, they're in it for the long haul. It's now years and years that they stick with us until they say, okay, now I only want to work with $5 million clients. I'm going to start shrinking my client base as opposed to growing it. Webinars aren't really any different as far as the number of events you should do, but I will set the expectations that seminars, you're going to get immediate hand raisers at the event. You should really be getting interest from about half of your audience to set an appointment with you. If not, you're probably doing something wrong. And then webinars tend to take a little bit longer. Some of them are going to book during the event, some are going to watch the replay, some are going to book later on. So webinars is a little bit longer of a play. So don't get discouraged if people don't immediately click on a link in a webinar. When you follow up with them, when you give them that recording, when you follow up with options, we see text, email, phone call. Do that for 30 to 45 days after your webinar. That's when you're going to generate your most appointments. Coincidentally, we do that for advisors because we saw that it worked really well. So we said, now we'll just do it for them. But if you're going to do a webinar, make sure you have that plan in place for, hey, the next 45 days, we're going to text them, we're going to call them, we're going to email them. And you know what would be great to put in there? A podcast, a white paper, one of those videos that you were talking about, or that you suggested and I talked about. So, but really give it 4 events, and really try to improve upon what you're doing. Most issues that we run into with advisors not closing business, it's a great problem because the problem is them. Right? It's okay. Well, there was significant assets in the room. We saw that, but hey, the guy told me they didn't have any money. Well, that's the first thing I would say to a salesman that I didn't like. Sorry, I'm broke. Right? So But we can help with that. We have professional coaches to work through with and help you increase your appointment set rate and the conversion rate. But, I've been there speaking in front of people and crickets come back and nobody raises their hand, to a point where 22 out of 25 people immediately walk over and say, here's my business card, right? So that it's a learning curve, and you have to give it time just like anything else.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Ramsey, thoughts, questions?
This was very, very helpful. As I mentioned, like, marketing is very nuanced. There's a lot of tools. It's just really important to understand and set one's own expectations about which tools solve which problems. And so that and 3,000 plus marketing zones were really the two huge takeaways for me from this discussion. So thank you for that, Brad.
Absolutely.
Hey, last question, which is, what gets you excited about this business? I mean, you go home and tell your wife, hey, I can't believe it. This happened. I love this business. What is it for you?
The thing that makes me sleep really sound at night, especially around what I do, is the more I am able to help advisors, either get in front of their community or work with more people. Like, what we do as an industry helps people. What we do can change families' lives, can really affect future generations and how they're set up. I mean, who wouldn't love that industry? Who wouldn't love helping communities become educated? If an advisor does a seminar and there's 20 people in the room, they book meetings with 10, they pick up 2 new clients, they see a positive ROI, they come back, they rinse, repeat, they do it again. There's still 18 other people in that room that learned something and got value out of that, and that might affect their lives further on. So if we're doing 700 events, 20 people at each, I mean, that is a lot of lives that could be positively impacted by what the advisors do and what we do at White Glove.
Oh, this is great. So, Brad, how should people find you, your company, your podcast? Where do we send them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we try to keep it real difficult, whiteglove.com, right? And then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Brad Swineheart. My podcast is on there. It's just called Be Advised, Leading with Value. It's on Spotify and Apple and all that good stuff, and there's probably a couple of good episodes on there. But yeah, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to share any expertise I can, any tips, any other insight. And if you want to get in front of more people and start building your business in a very stress-free, low-risk way, well, then whiteglove.com is your solution.
Hey, terrific. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Ramsey, thank you.
Pleasure.
Brad, and thanks to all our listeners. Give us feedback, send us questions. Love it when I get these text messages and questions on LinkedIn. Keep them coming. And join us again next week for another episode of That Annuity Show.